Both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance cast their ballots today in Florida and Ohio, respectively. Here's Donald Trump. Let's hear from him reflecting on his campaign. This is outside the polling station earlier.
You always have regrets. I can't think of any, to be honest, to use her expression. I can't think of any. I ran a great campaign. I think it was maybe the best of the three. We did great in the first one. We did much better in the second one, but something happened. And this was the best. I would say this was the best campaign we ran.
Here's Kamala Harris last night making a final pitch to voters in Pennsylvania.
I have lived the promise of America. And today, I see the promise of America in everyone who is here, in all of you. We are the promise of America. We are the promise of America.
Well, I'm joined now by Chad Connelly, a former Republican Party chair in South Carolina. Good evening to you.
Hello, how are you today?
Very well, thanks, Chad, for being with us. And Spencer Critchley, a comms consultant and Democrat strategist who worked on the Obama campaign. Good evening to you, Spencer.
Good evening.
It's really hard to tell where each campaign is at the moment. Can I just gauge your confidence, honestly, on this one? I just simply want an out of 10 from each of you. How confident are you feeling? Chad Connelly?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty confident, to be honest with you. The early vote numbers are significant. That's what we're watching the most. Democrats have underperformed in the early vote. And let's face it, our side told people for a long time, don't go early vote. But to be neck and neck in North Carolina, to win 14 out of 14 days in Nevada, to only have a deficit of about 383,000 early votes in Pennsylvania, when just 4 years ago it was about 1.3 million, those are significant numbers. And I think what we're seeing across the country is those low propensity Republican-leaning voters are coming out, and they're coming out for Donald Trump pretty big.
Spencer, your mark out of 10, how confident are you feeling?
I'm tempted to reflect the polls and say 5 because everything down to the vote in Dixville Notch, New Hampshire, where I think they counted 6 votes at midnight, has been split. And in Dixville Notch, it was 3-3. I will say, though, if I were forced to choose, I do lean towards Harris, and that's not just because of my partisan leanings, I don't think. I recognize there has been a lot of low propensity vote response, a lot of response among males for the Trump campaign, to my horror, frankly, as a fan of democracy. But the level of enthusiasm on the Harris campaign recalls the Obama campaigns of 08 and 12. That's the only thing I can compare it to. Something like 800,000 doors knocked in a day. I'm in contact with many Obama veterans who have volunteered for the Harris campaign, and you can't fake enthusiasm like that. But as I say, with the polling, I really don't think we know. And I think at this point in the history of polling, polls are essentially a black box, and we have to look for other signs and omens to try to read and trying to predict the future.
What do each of you think turnout will be like today, polling day? I wonder if we've got any indication on that so far. Chad or Spencer, whoever wants to take this. What do we know about who is turning up today? We know we've had record levels of early voting, but what about engagement today in terms of, queues, turnout?
Yeah, Spencer, you want to go first or you want me to?
No, I suspect, Chad, it sounds like you're more on top of the minute-by-minute results than I am today.
I am getting some good county information from, we're taking a look at about, 25 counties. And I think Spencer's totally right about the polling. And I think there's got to be a real reflection on some of the polling, quote unquote, experts after all of this, because I think Donald Trump has shown a real propensity to bring out those people who don't normally vote. They're not the known voters. So what we're seeing across the country is a really rare voter coming out. Donald Trump's McDonald's fry station, the riding in the garbage truck after the unfortunate comments by Joe Biden, he's capitalized on things like that. And then the Joe Rogan endorsement, just yesterday, those are big deals for people. They're watching that. And so I think there's a real degree of people who don't normally vote. Spencer and I talk about the 4 out of 4s and the 3 out of 4s. I think we're probably seeing people who don't vote 1 out of 5, 1 out of 6 times who are turning out. And that's the early numbers I'm looking for and I'm looking at in the individual states. I'm
joined in the studio by Josh Glancy. He's the former Washington bureau chief for the Sunday Times, former New York, Washington correspondent. Chad, let's welcome you back. In fact, Josh, Josh, I'm going to hand over to you with a question for Chad Connelly, former Republican Party chair in South Carolina.
Hi, Chad. Yeah, I was wondering, I mean, I just spent sort of 3 or 4 days in the US, and the sense there was, certainly among the many people I spoke to in Florida, that there had been late momentum for Harris. And there was a feeling that the Madison Square Garden rally from a couple of weeks ago and the fallout from that, and there was obviously that poll in Iowa over the weekend, and there was a feeling that the abortion issue was going to drive a lot of women to the polls, and that the suburbs were going to look good for Democrats. And we have seen a little bit of a movement in the polling and the modelling to reflect that. Not huge, but I wondered what you make of that. I mean, do you think there is a sort of a late break for Harris?
Well, it's a great question, right? And all the modeling is difficult to read. That Iowa poll, I believe, is an outlier because of her methodology. I think you're going to see that to be proven to be pretty wrong. But for the late breaking stuff, I looked at the history, and this is what we need to do, right? Look at trends. Hillary Clinton was up 3.2 points 4 years ago. Right now, Joe Biden was up 6.2 points 4 years ago. Hillary was up, that's 8 years ago. Kamala Harris is up 0.1%. And we also know Trump has always overperformed polls. I think that bodes really well for the former president. No question that the media tried to make a lot of the Puerto Rican comment. But that wasn't even Trump. That was a speaker that I'm not sure he could even have identified. And I believe it goes back to, and I've been in every state. I have a pastor network, and I feel like I got a pretty good finger on the pulse. People from every demographic, every stripe you can name. Here's what I kept hearing. Moms are scared for their children in the cities. Moms are scared for their kids because of the illegal immigration crime. It's rampant. They're concerned for the out-of-control crime. I don't know if you saw this, but in Los Angeles, some hoodlums ransacked Michael Jordan's premier Nike location after the Dodgers won the World Series. Washington, D.C. is boarding up, and everybody knows that's not to prevent from Republicans who are upset. That's Democrat voters who are upset. So I think what you're seeing is a little bit of a desperation from the Harris campaign. Oprah seemed desperate when she spoke last night. It just seems like a Hail Mary to me. I think Donald Trump's going to pull this out. And let's face it, 60-something million Americans had voted before the Madison Square Garden event last week. That's a big deal. They'd already made their decision by then.
Well, Chad, I mean, you mentioned the boarding up in Washington, D.C., which has become a kind of quadrennial event now, which is not a good thing. But they are also boarding up there because of what happened on January the 6th. 2021, and there is obviously a concern. We hear it a lot here in the UK that Donald Trump won't accept a narrow defeat, that he won't concede. I mean, he struggled to do so last time. Does that concern you if it does narrowly go for Harris, particularly given the polls have been so close that Trump just won't accept the result, and we could see another something like January 6th happen again?
Well, you got to keep in mind, we had 200 cities burn in the George Floyd riots, and those were largely Democrats. CNN called it mostly peaceful protesting. The only person I've heard say out loud that they would not accept the results was Jamie Raskin, a congressman. He said, Donald Trump will never step foot in the White House. We'll make sure of it in the United States Congress. Now, I don't think he can do that, but actually he is the only one who's made that kind of threat public. I haven't heard anybody in the Trump team or Trump himself say anything of the like. But Jamie Raskin made an out-and-out threat of insurrection itself. And so I believe there's a disparity. I'm not sure what media you guys consume over there, but I know that the media here is largely liberal. It leads hard left. And so a lot of what people see here might be focused on an isolated one-day January 6th event, but it happened in 200 cities during the George Floyd summer of riots everywhere.
Okay.
So I have not heard anybody talk about not accepting the result.
We are hearing reports that Donald Trump's been told by some advisors that he should prematurely declare victory on election night if he's sufficiently ahead of Kamala Harris. So, in battleground states like Pennsylvania, the consensus view we hear is that Trump has nothing to lose by claiming that he's won if he has kind of several 100,000 vote advantage in Pennsylvania, for example, although it won't be official, it won't be fully confirmed. We're being told that he may be being advised to just call it. He's got nothing to lose by calling it early. Would that be your advice to him as well, Chad? Would you go along with that?
I've not heard any of that. Here's what I would tell you. Think about Pennsylvania. So in 2020, Joe Biden had banked over 1.3 million votes ahead of Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. This year, the margin is 383,000 was the last number I saw yesterday afternoon for early voting. So Trump has cut into that early vote in Pennsylvania by 1 million votes. I'm really hopeful, y'all, that this is called tonight or early tomorrow. I think people don't trust a system that looks at a Florida that's a large state that reports results that night. And it just seems like the same states that are blue or purple take a lot more time to count votes, and it creates distrust. So I'm not sure what the president's being told, but I think he has a room for a lot of confidence going into election night.
But if it's
I'll
like
mention this too.
80% sure, if his team are 80% sure, it's not conclusive. Should they just go and call it anyway? Should he be punchy, do you think, in that way? A, to kind of stake his claim, I suppose, but also B, to stop it from dragging out unnecessarily for an unnecessary length of time. Should he call it early?
I like the word punchy. That's good. Look, I'd tell him to be confident, but I don't think he needs to be punchy. I think that there's a lot of reason for optimism. Did you see the Georgia numbers, y'all? I think they're indicative too. Typically, when Democrats do well in the state of Georgia and nationally, the percent of the black vote, early vote, is about 31, 32, even 34%. Right now, it's around 26%. So that doesn't bode well for Democrats nationally as well. But I don't think he needs to be punchy. I think he needs to be confident.